This video is an overview of the New York State Common Core Regents Part 3 textual analysis task. You will perform a close reading of one informational or literary text and write a 2 to 3 paragraph response that identifies a central idea in the text and analyzes how the author's use of one writing strategy develops that central idea. Let's take a look at what this task will look like on the Regents. What you see right now is a screenshot of an August 2015 Regents, Part 3. Outlined is your task in which you're going to read pages 18 and 19, which would be the informational or literary text, and more importantly, write a well-developed text-based response of 2 to 3 paragraphs. In your response, identify a central idea in the text and analyze how the author's use of one writing strategy develops this central idea. Use strong and thorough evidence from the text to support your analysis. Do not simply summarize the text. Then it's going to give you some guidelines. What's great about these guidelines is you can use this as a checklist for your writing while you're writing and certainly after you're writing. You want to be able to check off each of these bullet points to say, yes, I did in fact do that in my writing. And if I can draw your attention to the second bullet where it talks about the writing strategy, the wonderful thing is that New York State will actually give you a little bit of information in case you're struggling day of. And specifically what they're going to give you is examples of these writing strategies like characterization, conflict, denotation, connotation, metaphor, simile, irony, language use, point of view, setting, structure, symbolism, theme, tone, etc. Etc. meaning, of course, you're not limited to these. So again, you want to use this as a checklist for your writing. Before we begin to read the text, it's important to be sure you can answer the question, what is a central idea? As well as be able to identify literary and rhetorical devices in reading. Let's review. What is a central idea? Central idea is an idea that is repeated throughout a work. In fact, there will be numerous examples throughout the text that will support this idea. For example, in the play Hamlet that we've read in class, we see over and over again Hamlet, as well as other characters in the play, trying to get revenge. This is a central idea of the play. So while you're reading, you need to ask yourself, what is the major idea the author tries to convey? Keep in mind that there can be more than one central idea to a work. If you're familiar with the reading strategy of soapstone, taking into account the subject and the purpose can help you identify a central idea of a work. In addition to the central idea, this task also requires you to identify a writing strategy the author uses to develop the central idea. One of these writing strategies could be a literary device, or a technique which includes conflict, characterization, figurative language, irony, point of view, symbolism, denotation, connotation, simile, metaphor, etc. There are, of course, more of these. You want to make sure that you look over the definitions that you've gone over in class so that you can identify them in your reading. Another writing strategy is the use of a rhetorical device. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion in speech or writing achieved through logical thought and skillful use of language. Some of the rhetorical devices include, but are not limited to, ethos, logos, pathos, juxtaposition, paradox, anecdotal evidence, parallel structure. Again, be sure to look through the full list of devices that you've reviewed in class. In addition to soapstone, you want to take notes or annotations in the margins of the text as you read. This can include things like character names, central ideas, questions you may have, or insights that you come up with as you read. These annotations will be great references to quickly refer back to when it comes time to draft your response. So now, let's take a look at a sample reading. Take a moment and pause this video to read a sample passage. This is from the August 2015 Regents. This is the Part 3 that students were asked to read, identify a central idea, as well as a writing strategy that develops that central idea. Now it's time to write the response. Remember, it should be a 2 to 3 paragraph response, include one central idea, one writing strategy, and you must make a connection between the author's use of a writing strategy and the central idea that you identified. Before you begin to write, you want to take time to brainstorm. Take 5 minutes to plan your response. On the day of the Regents, you will have scrap paper and certainly enough room in the test booklet to create a quick outline. In that outline, you want to address the central idea. What is the main idea the author is trying to convey? And pull examples from the text that illustrate this central idea. You also want to outline the writing strategy. What literary device, technique, or rhetorical device did the author use to get that central idea across? And once again, because this is a text-based response, you want to pull out some examples from the text of that writing strategy that supports the central idea you chose. All examples should be in the form of textual evidence and include a citation, in this case a line number. And that citation is needed whether it's a direct quote from the text or paraphrased material. It is also essential that you explain your examples and make the connection back to what the task asks of you. You don't want your reader to jump to any conclusions. Make sure you walk them through your thought process. There is no one way to organize this response, but you must be sure to fully discuss the central idea in the text and discuss at least 2 examples of the author's use of a writing strategy to develop that central idea. Be sure you give the 2 to 3 paragraph response that New York State is looking for. And to make that response cohesive and coherent, you want to make sure that you provide topic sentences to clearly outline your discussion. What you're looking at right now is the New York State Regents Examination Part 3 rubric. As you can see, this is a 4-point rubric. If you look at the left-hand column where it says criteria, you can see that you will be graded based on content and analysis, command of evidence, coherence, organization, and style, as well as control of conventions. Take a few moments now to look at the criteria needed to score a 4. In order for your response to score a 4, you'll see that you need to introduce a well-reasoned central idea and a writing strategy that clearly establishes the criteria for analysis. You also need to demonstrate a thoughtful analysis of the author's use of the writing strategy to develop that central idea. Ideas must be presented clearly and consistently, making effective use of specific and relevant evidence to support analysis. It must have a logical organization of ideas and information to create a cohesive and coherent response. Establish and maintain a formal style using precise language and sound structure, and demonstrate control of the conventions with infrequent errors. If you take a look at the bottom, you'll notice 3 bullet points. A response that is a personal response and makes little or no reference to the task or text can be scored no higher than a 1. A response that is totally copied from the text with no original writing must be given a 0. A response that is totally unrelated to the task, illegible, incoherent, blank, or unrecognizable as English must be scored as a 0. Now that we know how we will be rated, let's take a look at a sample. If you notice, the author of this sample has created a 3-paragraph response. As we read it, try to keep the rubric in mind and the criteria that is necessary to receive a 4. Let's start with the first paragraph. A central theme or idea in this excerpt from a diary entry focuses on the narrator's feelings of despair or helplessness as the realization takes hold that he is being held prisoner in a desolate castle. The author effectively develops this idea through his use of tone. To me, the tone of a piece of literature is described as the author's voice. This encompasses diction, writing style, sentence-paragraph structure, and anything else that the writer can use to make his voice stand out to help develop the central idea. So this first paragraph seems to be almost an introduction. In this paragraph, the author has outlined the central idea of despair or helplessness and the writing strategy of tone. Let's go on to the next paragraph. One example of the author using tone to help develop the central idea of despair in the story is the way he describes the setting. The author describes the characters' surroundings as dull, dreary, gray, stony, and overall very depressing. Words such as stone stair, narrow darkness of the courtyard, and the window was tall and deep, stone mullioned, and though weather-worn, reinforce this gloomy setting. When the author does this, he immediately implements the idea of depression or sadness into the piece of literature. The author also uses word choice to his advantage. The author is able to use his tone to convey the idea of despair through words and phrases like desperate straits, line 13, prisoner, line 1, I was helpless, line 5, and I know, either being deceived like a baby by my own fears, or line 12. The author is able to convey the idea of desperation and despair through these gloomy quotes and create a tone which also helps to develop the central idea. Despite a few grammatical errors in this paragraph, the author or the writer of this sample does a great job at providing ample evidence that supports this idea that there is a tone, a gloomy tone, and then also makes the connection of that gloomy tone to develop the central idea of desperation of the narrator. And now the last paragraph. The author is able to utilize his dull and gloomy tone to help develop the central idea of despair in more ways than one. Whether it be his word choice, sentence structure, or descriptions, the author's voice really comes through in this excerpt. The narrator of this piece of literature is in despair and feeling helpless as a result of the unfortunate situation he has found himself in. This last paragraph seems to be a conclusion of sorts, where the author wraps up their argument. They get their point across and make sure that the reader really understands the connection that they're trying to make between the author's use of tone to develop that central idea. If you notice, despite a few errors, New York State gave this response a 4, the highest score possible. Let's refer back to the rubric to better understand why. The response introduces a well-reasoned central idea and a writing strategy that establishes the criteria for analysis. The writer provides a thoughtful analysis of the author's use of diction in the text to develop the central idea about desperation and despair, providing clear and ample evidence of support. The response is well organized as it introduces the central idea and then identifies and defines the writing strategy of tone. The writer then provides examples of this tone through the author's use of word choice and connects them back to the central idea. The response maintains a formal style of writing with precise language, and there are infrequent errors in conventions. Again, there is no one way to organize this information. However, your information should be organized, and it should include the discussion of a central idea and a writing strategy that utilizes ample support of textual evidence. So remember to review your task, read actively, and write a well-planned and well-organized response of 2 to 3 paragraphs in which you clearly identify a central idea and writing strategy with sufficient evidence to support your ideas.